Good afternoon, everybody. It gives me great pleasure to introduce briefly what Nicole is all about. Before we do so, I'll introduce myself. So my name is Johan de Vrije. I am the chair of Nicole. But in real life, if you like, I work as the global head of EHS, Environment, Health and Safety at Signify, which is the new name since a few years of Philips Lighting. Nicole itself, as you can see on the slide, is the network for industrially coordinated sustainable land management in Europe. The original name was the Network for Industrially Contaminated Land in Europe. We decided to tweak it a little as we have evolved in terms of our focus, and we'll delve into it right away. So what is Nicole? It's a network that was established in 1996. So this year we are celebrating our 25th anniversary. And it's a network that initially was purely an industrial network of large multinational companies that felt that they needed to come together to look at how they can provide fact-based and science-based information around how you manage contaminated industrial land. It was funded by the European Commission initially. Now it's a standalone network funded by its members. And we've broadened the membership from industry alone to also include service providers that are active in this field, as well as academia. And currently we count over 100 members that, again, look at the facts, evolving science, state of the art of how one manages contaminated land in Europe. Moving on, as I said, it's a network, and the focus is really around exchanging knowledge, experience, skills, if you like, between the different members. It's a very open network, very informal, and I think the informality is really the success of the network, where we look at best practices, where we communicate with other stakeholders, both inside as well as outside Europe. And we identify research needs. We have working groups that do that work with universities to look at what is still a gap, what still needs a solution, and then we build from there. We have 2 workshops per year. They used to be face-to-face workshops, but as with many organizations across the globe, we've now turned them into virtual workshops. We're hoping that the next workshop in the fall will be again a face-to-face one. We have subgroups that assemble the different types of members, industry, service providers, and academics. And then we have working groups where all members can participate around a particular topic, and you see some of the currently active members, working groups such as sustainable remediation, the regulatory working group, asbestos is one that is very active. And then we have the innovation working group, which also has the Innovation Award, which we issue every second year. We have a monthly newsletter, as you would imagine. And then we also regularly publish position papers on a particular topic, a new legislative initiative at the European Union level, or any other types of issue that we believe warrants a publication. And for example, we're working on one around transferring environmental contaminated land liability from one owner or one problem owner to another. In particular, when in land transactions, that is a very sensitive subject that we felt warrants a publication and some studying across Europe to see how different jurisdictions work with that transfer of liability. In a number of jurisdictions, there's actually no regulation whatsoever, and it is not possible to transfer liability. So again, that is something that is coming out in the next month or so. Nicole has evolved since its inception in 1996. As you can see, it initially was very much focused on the regulations and the standards that you need to apply, the concentration that you need to reach when you clean up contaminated land. But we've evolved, we've moved on to risk-based approaches and focusing more on risk than actual concentrations, which is a more sensible approach to cleaning up land. And in the meantime, we've even evolved from there, where we look at sustainable remediation solutions, where you look at not only at the problem, the technical solution that you want to solve, but also involving the multi-stakeholders that are typically involved in any cleanup of contaminated land, be that neighbors, owners, tenants, scientists, regulators, of course, buyers. And we've now even looked even beyond sustainability, where we look at land stewardship, where you look at land as a value and having an intrinsic value by itself, and how you are, as an owner or an operator of a site, actually the steward of that land, where you temporarily use it for a particular purpose, in our case industry, but that may not be the eternal usage that you have in mind. So you look at it from that perspective, and you give it back for another use at some point in time. That's the evolution of Nicole, and I think I would leave it at that. And I would wish all of you a very successful webinar. Please contact us if you have questions. We're a very open network, as I mentioned, and again, good luck with the webinar. Thank you very much.
Hello, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Jose Blanco. I'm the Secretary General for the European Demolition Association. Thank you to our president, Mr. Cobo. Thank you also to Johan, the president of Nicole, chairman of Nicole. And I will be the moderator for today. And to do so, I have two excellent speakers with us. They're going to be Gaspar Baleriola and Mohamed Gharbi. Gaspar is already here. So without further ado, so we can gain some time for the Q&A, Gaspar, I leave the floor to you. I kindly ask you to introduce yourself.
Okay, thank you very much, Jose. Good afternoon, everybody. This is Gaspar Baleriola speaking from TAUW, and I'll be your guide tonight, along with my colleague Mohamed Gharbi, about an important thing that Mr. De Vrije pointed out already, which is liabilities concerning soil and groundwater, but also within the demolition context, as this is an end-of-life process that involves sometimes the occurrence of soil and groundwater contamination. So let's go to it. Okay, first few introduction of who is TAUW. We are an engineering and consultancy firm, completely European, and we are present in 6 countries here in Europe: the Netherlands, Belgium, Germany, France, Spain, and Italy. And we are currently around 102,000 people. And well, let's go to it. First of all, I'd like to all of you participate in the small survey or poll. You have a poll screen on the right part of your screen now. And I would like to know, well, how do you know about environmental damage and liabilities? So please ask. It's a rather informal survey now, because you might or might not be involved in this kind of business or activities. So maybe you don't know anything about it, or you are completely sure you're being affected and liable. So go ahead, let's give it a minute for this poll.
This is Jose again, just a warning for everybody. On your right, as Gaspar said, you will see polls. Please just tell us your feedback. There you go. Thank you.
Okay, first answers coming in. So yeah, it's moving fast now. I see that at least 22% of the people are answering, say what? That's cool. And well, things are moving fast now. So yeah, it seems that it's going to stop now. Okay, so let's take a look at the results. Most of the people are not concerned about this. What makes me wonder is that the edges are touching, because around 10-15% of the answers are going whether they don't know about what's going on, say what answer, or there's people that definitely, yes, I am an operator of an industrial facility. are sure that they are liable to environmental damage. And in the middle will be providers, contractors, engineers, or just I was passing by. So for those in the end distribution of these answers, those who don't know what environmental liability is, I hope that these next slides will give you some insights. And for those that are definitely yes affected by environmental liability, I hope that we can give you some clues about how to proceed. So, okay, environmental liability is, well, it's the mechanism to hold financially liable an operator of an activity who has caused an environmental damage. So is the expression, is the legislation that made tangible the polluter pays principle, which is the meaning, the leading concept of environmental protection within the European Union and also abroad. So the key point is here to be held financially liable. So will be a damage, whether it is to the soil, water, or natural resources, and there's a financial liability to that. So you will pay for your pollution. That's the key concept. In the lower part of the slide, you see the actual name of the directive within the European Union, which is the number 35 of 2004. And this was entered into force, as we see afterwards, entered into force in 2007. So from 2007 on, we will see that many operators are to be responsible or liable to any potential or actual damage to water, soil, and natural resources. So it has everything to do with industrial facilities. And we, as a part of EDA, we are very concerned about demolition works as part of the end of life of facilities. So whether you are a demolition actor or you are the owner, which is the right word, will be the operator of that industrial facility, you will be liable to any actual or potential damage to the environment. And who is actually liable to that, who is applied by this directive, is set in Annex 3 of this directive, which covers all the IPPC activities, those that are applied also by the the Industrial Emissions Directive, but also waste management activities, also activities that are air pollutants, which means mostly power stations, also activities that are handling, producing, transporting dangerous substances, and also those who are making discharge into water. So with this scope of activities, almost any medium to large enterprise is going to be affected by this directive. But there is also an important aspect, is that any activity causing damage to species, when doing so, if at fault or negligent, are also applied. So this means that even if you are not within the Annex 3 of this directive, you could be liable to environmental damage if you did that damage in fault or being negligent. And these could even more strict country-wise, as for in Spain, for instance. This faulty or negligent cause can also apply to other type of damages. So this is important because only the nuclear or defense sectors or the diffuse sources are left out of the scope of this directive. So summing up, almost everybody is affected by this directive. So what is the relation with soil and groundwater contamination and also demolitions? Well, everything, because groundwater is part of the three main damages, which is within the scope of this directive. And groundwater is part of water, soil is land, and there will be another part of the possible damage, which is habitats or natural species. So groundwater and land and soil are 2/3 of the damages set by this directive. So yeah, when we are coming into a project of, in a demolition or a process or industrial facility, soil and groundwater contamination, it is fully within the scope of this directive. So here you can see a graphic about this, how this works. So in the end, this means that if you are making any kind of damage to water, land, or biodiversity, and even if you do that with your industrial security measures, then you will be liable to that. You have to pay for your damage, okay? So this is a process that involves the whole life cycle of an industrial facility, because you have to do that in advance. You have to plan in advance what kind of damage are you going to do, to get a risk assessment, an industrial risk assessment for that, and have somebody say how much damage is that, what are the chances of that damage happening, and then setting a value of that damage. So we go into that in the next slides. So if you are a contractor in demolition, are you affected by this? Well, not directly, because you are not the operator of the facility. Only the operators of the facility or the owners of the land. If this is a brownfield, for instance, maybe you're asking, I'm going to make a demolition of a brownfield, which is difficult to say who is responsible for that. Then the owner of the land will be liable, okay? So, but this is going to take at the end of life of a facility, then demolition has everything to do, because usually all these kind of works of remediation and restoration takes place in this end of life step. So maybe even you will be, as a contractor, you will be the one who is going to carry out the restoration of the damage, which in this case will be a soil or groundwater remediation. So again, you can even be affected directly by this directive if you, by this negligent or default option, you maybe be causing an additional damage to that. And that is for sure, you know about this thing I'm talking about, because maybe you have to contract an insurance for your work. So then maybe your insurance is going to be more expensive because of you are dealing with hazardous substances, and because of the possibility of you as an operator of the demolition to conduct any kind of damage. So following the polluter pays principle, who is going to pay for all this? Well, of course, it will be the polluter, the operator, but that's our clients. So how is going to pay for that? Well, this directive introduced an interesting concept, that is the financial fee that you have to provision and you have to set up when you start your activity, based on that risk assessment that will going to tell you what are the chances that certain damage will occur. And somebody, usually an insurance firm, is going to set a value of that damage. So you will be paying, the operator will be paying for all this damage to be done, which is potential or actual damage, except if it's a very small damage under 3,000 kilo euros, or if you have implemented an EDA system or an ICO 40,000 quality and environmental system, then that figure rises to 2 million. But again, if the damage is higher than that, then you have to set up a financial fee for that. That is what is shown in this picture. So in the right part of the picture, we see that all of the environmental damage is an unforeseen liability. Okay, we'll be talking about foreseen liabilities, which is something that you can make a provision for that, For instance, closure of the activity is a foreseen liability. You cannot walk away when you finish your industrial activity. You have to conduct several steps, and one of that will be the closure. But maybe the environmental damage is an unforeseen liability. So that is covered under usually a financial provision that you have to contract with an insurance firm, okay? So this works, as I said, first you make the risk assessment, then with certain formulas you set up how is the chances that that damage is going to happen, and then calculate the actual value of that damage. And then after that, you have to go to an insurance firm and contract this financial provision. So another quick survey. How much do you think the soil and groundwater issues are going to cost at your site? So just to rough figures, please enter your answers. How much do you think this is liabilities related to soil and groundwater are not of concern at your site?
Once again, Jorge Blanco here, just to reinforce what Gaspar is saying. On your right, there you go. Yeah, I see everybody going there. So on your right, you have the poll. Just give us your feedback. Thank you.
Okay, first answers coming in. Again, we see a Gauss curve here. Yeah, people is providing feedback. So now the winner will be around 100, 500 kilo euros. Fortunately, nobody is answering that won't happen to me. That's good, because it's going to happen for sure. So yeah, we have mixed results here, very split between the 4 options. But again, yes, the actual cost of a remediation is hard to tell, but sure it's going to cost you very well into the hundreds of thousands of euros, or more likely or in the range of millions of euros. So this is a very sensitive and very important quantity that could be a disaster, because you might, as I said before, this is not a foreseen liability. You don't have this thing planned usually. So when you go to the end of life of facilities and you find out that on top of your demolition project, you have to conduct a soil or groundwater remediation in the range of, let's say, 1 million, 10 million euros, then you are in big trouble, because these could even be the same range of the cost of the actual demolition. So, yeah. So, a few words about transferring these liabilities. Well, here the rule is that following the polluter pays principle, it's the operator who is going to retain the liability, okay? So this is important, because even if you walk away from your site, which is not the case usually, but it happens from time to time, then you still be liable to your damage, okay? So land damage can be transferred, okay? This is the easiest kind of damage to be transferred, land damage, okay? So this, in the acquisition process, which is transferred, which is translated into a contract, you have to be very clear about how you state this liability transfer. You have to state clearly that who was the original pollutant, okay? Who caused that polluting event? Who is the polluter, okay? You have to also state when that damage or when that polluting event took place, because as we will see in a few slides, this is important because maybe that liability has expired, okay? And it's important to state in this transaction how much of that liability you are going to acquire, because maybe the wisest thing as a buyer, as an acquirer, is to state that you are not all going to acquire the environmental liability. This is tricky because the regulation tries to avoid that, but that's why lawyers have a lot to say here. writing proper contracts to wholly, partially, or by no means state how much part of that liability is going to be transferred. And of course, the important thing here is that, and this is depending on the national legislations, but once the usual concept is that once you state a price for that transfer, then the transfer of the liability takes place. So by the same process that the buyer is willing to pay or at least to accept a decrease in the price of the item that is buying, then that means that he is acknowledging that kind of liability. So it's transferring the liability. So the transfer of the liability goes mainly in the reducing of the price of the transfer. And of course, the extent of the damage has to be stated in this contract. So here this is difficult also, this is a tricky point because sometimes the damage has not been properly assessed. And we will go to that later on. So important things about soil and groundwater liabilities. Well, timing. Liability is going to expire after 30 years after the event that caused that damage took place, except for those damages taken place before the 13th of April 2007, which is the date that this directive entered into force. And what is the scope of the damage you have to restore? Well, damage to land is stated by the risk assessment, and how that risk assessment says that land uses are prevented or affected. So this is usually assessed with deviation from the baseline status. The baseline status is usually stated with a specific study for your site, or else by national regulations that depends on the European country, who could state actual reference concentrations for soil quality. Those are called SSTLs. Okay. Damage to water and damage to natural resources are assessed by deviation from baseline, and all of the water and specifically groundwater protection regulations goes into this sense. So deviation from baselines or deviations from initial states are caused by your activity, then you are liable to that and you have to restore that. Okay. So important thing here is that you have to state before you start your activity your baseline, and then go on with a monitoring program to see how that quality of your soil and groundwater is going to deviate, and make a final comparison before you leave. So if that final comparison differs significantly from the initial conditions, then you have done a damage to soil and groundwater, and then you're liable to that. So now what? Okay, first thing you have to do is to ask yourself, what do you know? So you'll be 3 types of knowns or unknowns. The first thing it will be to say what you actually know that you know. So this is called the foreseen liability, which is usually it's the demolition and the closure process. Okay. This is usually the easiest part because, okay, you know that, okay, you have to do that and you have plans for that and you have some money set apart for that, and this is the easiest part. And then you have some known unknowns. So this is still foreseen, okay? This is how things will go during the demolition, but also things that you know might happen and your insurance is going to cover for that, okay? But then we go into the third part, the unknowns. Okay, this is what we call usually the unforeseen liability. This is something that, well, at first stance, you might think that you don't have a plan for that, but this is a bad plan. This is a bad idea. You should have your unknown unknowns trimmed down to the minimum. And that's why you have to conduct a soil and groundwater monitoring plan and soil and groundwater investigation on the final status of your site before you leave, and have to that into your demolition plan. So This is also for the lawyers, what they call the hidden defects, especially when you're talking about transactions of land. So some tips. Well, it's important, very important, that you have your baseline conditions determined beforehand. Even more when you are going to transfer that, because if you are acquiring a site and you don't have a clear picture on what your baseline conditions are, then you don't have a starting point to make the deviation, to assess the deviation from that point, and then you will be acquiring the full liability of the site, because there's nothing to compare to. So it's important that it's very important in the transaction processes and in the end of life, when you go to closure facilities, to have very clear what is your starting point. And then, of course, as I said before, take those samples, make that risk assessments during and after your closure, because you have to assess what the deviations are. And of course, this is not something that shouldn't be taking place at the last moment of the demolition. This should be part of the planning, of the strategic planning of your facility. The complete demolition plan is that one that takes these type of things into account. So you have to make realistic and robust roadmaps. And this is a proposal or a schematic of this roadmap to a successful closure, which should start well in advance before you start the actual closing. If we have the closure date at the right part of this chart, then you should be starting in the number one, let's say 5, 7, 10 years in advance of closure. At least have some drafts of that, because if you don't, you won't be able to react, and you won't be able to have time enough to leave in the right conditions when step 5 will take place. Step 1, of course, is planning, strategy, the roadmap, and of course, have a first impression of costs and time. Step number 2 will be the selection of the alternatives you have to conduct. You have to select your contracting actions, but also your possible methodologies to make the remediation in case you know or you are suspecting that you're going to have a land or groundwater damage. And then, of course, in step 3, you have to take that selection into a detailed engineering plan. So that's the demolition plan, the remediation plan, and start tendering and permitting, because these things, both tendering and permitting, could take you well into 1 year, 2 years, depending on the situation. And then is when you actually do the things. So you start executing things according to your demolition plan, but also taking into account health and safety issues, quality control, and supervision of that works. And finally, you will be delivering the demolition with the soil and groundwater remediation, and have your permits to go away and make the actual closing down of the facility with no further liability. So, into the final part of my presentation, I'm going to speed up things a bit. So, some more tips about soil and groundwater. Be clear that when you are going to be remediation, you could take some of the affected soil by excavation along with these structures, but that's not going to be the solution in general, because that will be only a fraction of the problem. And always think that groundwater is going to remain an issue. And this could be for years, even decades. So be sure that you don't have a substantial groundwater impact, because that is an order of magnitude more complex than soil affection. You have to make sure that you have all the sources planned, mapped, and everything. So during dismantling operations, you have to be very careful about tanks, pipings, and everything, because that could be an additional damage to the ones you already have. And of course, you have to take into account all of the extra waste made by the remediation works into your waste management plan. Okay, and because sometimes it could be even more substantial than your own original waste plan. And of course, you have to make monitoring works not only for your demolition works, but also for all these two components, water and land. And some useful tips is that you should involve stakeholders and community players into your plan, because that will save you a lot of time, a lot of social pressure. Make them part of the solution. Don't turn your stakeholders or the community players into a problem. They are also part of your plan. And of course, try to make that in a sustainable and corporate responsible way. So this is it. Thank you for your attention. And now I'm turning the word and the floor to my colleague, Mohamed Gharbi. Thank you very much.
Thank you for the opportunity. My name is Mohamed Gharbi. I'm leading the business unit site development within TAUW Germany. I will present you a brief overview of our latest experience within decommissioning projects. I selected some examples for plants operating with mercury. So within decommissioning projects, we have a scope of work consisting of a different step. We started activities usually with desktop study and fieldwork survey based on the information gained within the first step. Cost and duration of the work could be estimated. Tendering documentation will be prepared, and the selection or the demolition companies or the contractor will be selected. During the decommissioning work, with regard to health and safety aspect, the works will be supervised, of course, in order to meet all health and safety aspects in the project. Following the construction of the above ground structure, soil and groundwater assessment and remediation are usually planned. So the start for this project, the start of the work is expected by the end of this year. I try to make it a little bit faster because we don't have a lot of time. So we are working on 3 former mercury chlor-alkali plant. Some are in activities, the other in closure steps. Depending on the plant, about 50 to 100 electrolysis cells were used there. All mercury cells have been dismantled and disposed of. We have in the first picture here the investigation are ongoing currently. In the second one, the tendering process is ongoing, and in the third one, the supervision or the decommissioning work is ongoing since 9th month now. Yeah. What is about the process? So we have here former mercury chlor-alkali plant. I want just to summarize the process. Chlorine alkali electrolysis was used to produce chlorine, hydrogen, and caustic soda from salt. Then metallic mercury was used here during the electrolysis process. Then the electrolysis of salt solution in this plant is carried out according to the amalgam process between the titanium anode and the mercury cathode. Due to the process steps, the emerging material flow as well as all equipment and pipeline are contaminated with mercury. Then due to the interconnected facility in the process, we can observe direct contamination with mercury, with the presence of liquid mercury in some facilities, and the undirected diffuse contamination with mercury throughout the building material and waste contaminated mercury also. In addition, the emission of mercury-containing dust from during the demolition work has to be taken into consideration in that case. Yeah. We have some major challenge within this type of work. Yeah? The major challenge for us is the first ranking is the safety. Of course, the safety is the main. We have multiple risks due to the state of building, all technology, year of construction, also the presence of various type of contaminant like mercury, PCB, dioxin, asbestos. We have a lot of co-activities with mainly potential explosive atmosphere close to our workplace. So within operation of the dismantling work, we are confronted also with significant health and safety aspects, like working at height, working with fire, heavy equipment, confined spaces and utilities. So it's very important to keep the worker here healthy. So the people protection is the main focus during such type of works. Yeah? The second challenge is the waste characterization. How could we quantify and qualify waste and identify the legal, the correct or the right correct waste way? So we have first to make a good assessment of the quantity, of the amount of waste that will be generated during the demolition work. For this, we made usually a detailed desk study that gives us very good information about thickness, extent, and dimension of contaminated substances. Following that, we performed on-site measurements and inspection using also drones to build 3D models. So that gives us a good combination between safety and the quality of the data. So then we have to qualify the waste. After quantification, we have to qualify this amount of waste in order to define the classes of waste. So for this, we made a lot of site measurements by means of different field screening equipments. For example, XRF, JROM, and phaser. And by means of this measurement on site, we helped us to build a good sampling program in order to analyze the different components of the building. We collected a lot of sample and we performed, in addition, laboratory analysis in order to have an idea about the concentration of the level of contamination. Some asbestos material contaminated with mercury. For that type of waste, we don't have the full-scale lab equipment adapted. So it's considered to be hazardous waste directly. The third challenge for us is the waste disposal. How could we define the disposal way and which measures could we conduct on site after demolition? How could we manage this amount of different categories of waste? Yeah? This is the last big one, is to define the correct disposal way for each category of waste. Yeah? So we have here an example for you. You can see in the table an example of the classification of waste. And of course, we have to deal mainly with hazardous material. When you see here, yes, it is directly considered as hazardous material with the corresponding waste code here. On the left, on the text, we have an example of the main destination of the waste. So we have a different type of waste. For the first one is decontaminated. Then we have hazardous waste with mercury, where we on-site perform additional treatment, like specific stabilization and then final disposal landfill. We have also hazardous material with PCB, where we treat this by incineration and final disposal. The dangerous waste with mercury and asbestos. The way is the underground disposal, and then we have here also metallic mercury, where the stabilization process was conducted in order to reduce the level of contamination before this transport, in order to reduce also the emission aspect. Yeah? So we have here the lessons learned. Of course, learns first about safety. Our goal during such type of work is zero incident. Yeah? So I want to highlight the importance of the daily supervision, helping in the prevention of risk. Then it's also very important to perform last-minute risk assessment, brainstorming, the daily brainstorming, performing the take 5 action before starting the day of work. Yeah? Then it's also very interesting or very important to perform regular medical survey in order to check the exposition level for the worker working on contaminated area. Additional aspect which have to be learned during this type of work, we have the planification and anticipation. It's the key issues. Yeah? So the work preparation is very important, and then the good sharing of information and communication between different stakeholders. This is the key success of this type of work. Yeah? So we have also the waste elimination, the importance of anticipated exams to secure every step of elimination, importance of the second characterization during demolition work to optimize, when possible, the waste road. Yeah? This is very important because maybe in the first assessment, we have usually some data gaps which could be completed during the second characterization. So if you have the survey, this is my question to you. Please give the answer. Do you usually take soil and groundwater issue into your demolition plan? Very much the majority responds with yes. It's very important issues. Yeah? It depends, of course, of the type of activities of operation and the relevant chemicals may be used inside. Yeah. So mainly we are dealing with industrial chemicals which could infiltrate into the surface and impact the soil and groundwater. Though it's very important to take this issue into consideration. Yeah? So not only the substances on the building, but also soil and groundwater issues has to be considered, and perform soil and groundwater investigation, try to delineate or to limit the extent of chemicals in order to have a good idea for, or the good basis for remediation plan if needed. Thank you very much.